Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode of the unscripted Ask a Game Designer Anything. You seem to have liked well enough the previous video, which was like the first attempt at this, and I hope you will enjoy this one as well. Let's get started. The first message is from Magnetism R. This channel never gets old because every video is something new. Why, thank you. Regarding visual design, in the future, can you put the questions up top so as to not hide the background gameplay? No! Okay, yes, yeah, here you go. I will do that, I don't mind. Next. What video game market do you think is greatly underserved and underestimated by the industry? I think there is an extra do there that's not necessary, but that's beside the point. Anyway, this is a question I'm actually excited to talk about, because barely anyone talks about it. And this audience that I'm gonna discuss is not necessarily underserved, you'll understand why in a bit, but it is underestimated and largely misunderstood. And that audience is the majority of people who play games. Because the majority of people who play games, they don't post online their feedback and opinions about a game. And it's like the overwhelming majority. I'm talking about like 90%. The stuff, the discussions that we see online about games is from a very small subset of, overall engaged, really online engaged players. And most people who play games are not part of that. Sometimes they might post something related to games that they really like or really hate, in like extreme cases. But by and large, their opinion is unheard, which makes it really difficult to, gauge qualitatively what is the actual global reception about one thing or another. And it's tricky because a lot of decisions are based in the industry are based on gathered data, gathered feedback, and that feedback is from it's from a very small subset of players, the ones who post online, and the data, because there is no feedback to correlate with it, I don't believe that some data we get necessarily represents what the majority of players actually think. For example, skill trees is a feature that's used in a lot of mainstream video games now, big budget mainstream games. I would assume one of the reasons why is because data shows that people interact with the system, and while, we can't look at internal analytics of any given game since they're internal. If we take a look at the data we do have externally, like achievements, we can notice that the achievements to get all skills in a skill tree usually have a pretty high percentage completion rate, so we can assume that a lot of people interact with the system. But just because they interact with those systems doesn't mean that they actually properly engage with them qualitatively. And because players, generally speaking, don't post anything online, it's pretty difficult to figure out if that's the case beyond anecdotal experiences. But for example, from my experience, when it comes to those kinds of people who, like to play games but are not like online gamers, with a big online presence, for most of them, even when they engage with skill trees, they do that not because they find them useful or interesting, but because there is an exclamation point that they want to get rid of. Because for most of them, again, anecdotally speaking, most of the people I know who don't post online, they don't really see a reason to, they don't understand why they need to get the skills, they don't understand what problem it solves for them, they don't understand when they get the skills, because it's like, oh, you just purchased the skill point, they might forget the next session that they have that skill now, because there was nothing to train them to actually use that skill, There are some games like Ghost of Yotei which You know, Ghost of Yotei actually teaches a lot of its skills in-game through missions, and that's actually great. A lot of its skills, a lot of its tool sets and stuff like that, which is fantastic. But also Ghost of Yotei has a lot of skills that you just get from, you know, abstract skill trees. And yeah, I didn't see those being utilized at all from, you know, from people who I have seen play the game and do not be online to talk about it. But again, this is anecdotal, there is no data, so this is why it's so difficult to talk about it. But I think there is like just a lot of misunderstanding of what the majority of players actually engage with and why, and that I believe that this lack of understanding doesn't always lead to the best choices in the industry or to the best trends in the industry, because, you know, if we get back to skill trees, there is a bunch of feedback from like more experienced players, so to speak, that hey, some of the skill trees are boring or repetitive or something like that, but hey, data shows that skill trees are used, so it must be good, right? It must be useful, the audience at large must enjoy it, but that's not necessarily the case. And this also concerns things that, you know, experienced players might like or might agree on, but it doesn't necessarily represent what the audience at large actually thinks, you know? So yes, this is the market that's, you know, greatly underestimated by the industry, I believe. The actual people who play games, because by and large they're not being heard, and the data points surrounding them a lot of the times, I believe, is analyzed or is interpreted in a way that doesn't necessarily showcase the truth. Yes. And then the last question from Magnetism R is, what's the best and the worst way to start making games for a living? You know, I've got into the industry 14 years ago. Whatever was the best way then is not the best way now, so it doesn't make sense to talk about my experience. What would be the best way now? Honestly, stuff has changed so much, even in the past year, that I don't even know what proper advice to give. But I can say that the worst way to start making games for a living is dropping everything to start making games. Yeah, honestly, surprisingly enough, I think this is like the most difficult question for me to answer, since the space has changed so much. Yeah, I don't know. Ask me something simpler next time. Okay, so next we have a message from Magdiel6709. When working with a large team, how do you ensure everyone involved with the implementation of the gameplay mechanics you designed are all on the same page when working towards your vision for the gameplay? Well, one of the most important factors of like any team collaboration is transparency. And by that I mean, it's not enough to just like, abstractly speaking, design something, write a GDD, show that to the team, and then, you know, go implement that. No, there has to be transparency on every level. Starting with, okay, first we get the high concept of the feature or the mechanic, and then we gather with the relevant people to make sure to align on that. Hey, is this clear? Do you have concerns about this? Do you have feedback about this? How this will work? What should be incorporated in the GDD in the future, to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Then the same thing has to be done when you have like a first proper draft of the actual design, or I mean, it depends if you have a prototype or not. Like there can be like additional stages there, but you know, it's like always, if there is a prototype, that, you know, it's always discussed. There's always communication between you and other people. And then when there's the first draft, again, you communicate, ask questions, you discuss things. And then when the design is sort of finalized and it has to go into like a production, to go into the sprint or whatever planning methods you have as a task to like be completed, there should be a proper kickoff, like to make sure that, okay, on the final stage, everyone agrees that this is good to do, we're gonna do it like this, let's go. And even then, it doesn't stop there, because as the feature gets implemented, it should be play-tested regularly, and again, any feedback as the development goes, if, you know, some things have to be changed because practice often is different from theory, it's like that has to be always discussed, and production has to be adjusted according to that. So basically, you make sure everyone involved with the implementation is aligned by making sure they are aligned, by talking to them all as often as possible to ensure transparency. And it doesn't matter if you're working remotely or in an office together, you know, the principles of transparency and clear communication, clear definition of validation, of like concepts, prototypes, drafts, and then the final designs of what goes into proper production, all that kind of stuff. You know, it all has to be clear and transparent. It doesn't always happen, but when that doesn't happen, you know, it leads to quite messy productions. So, yes, these are the questions that we will discuss for today. Hope you have enjoyed this issue as well, and if... episode, whatever. This is not a magazine. Anyway, if you have enjoyed listening to me and have some other questions you'd like to ask, feel free to do so in the comments.